So, now you know what we are. Now you know what you are. You'll never grow old, Michael. And you'll never die. But you must feed.
This week, we're going to talk about the Lost Boys. Let's get at it.
Remember, we keep it tight, and it's a podcast world. We're ready to ignite. That's the lesson. You got it all. Tune in, turn up, come vibe with us, y'all. So remember.
Tonight, we're going to talk about the Lost Boys. The Lost Boys was made in 1987. It's an American horror film directed by Joel Schumacher and was produced by Harvey Bernhard, with a screenplay written by Jeffrey Boehm, Janice Fitcher, and James Jeremias. The film follows two teenage brothers who moved with their divorced mother to the fictional town of Santa Carla, California, only to discover that the town is a haven for vampires. Now, what a lot of people don't understand about this movie was a staple for me growing up. It's actually a staple for me now. It's one of my comfort movies that I watch just whenever I want to throw something on TV that makes me feel good, you know. But a lot of, as I was studying for this podcast this week, I found out a lot of stuff that I didn't know, and maybe you guys don't know either. But the plot of the movie was kind of based around Peter Pan and the Lost Boys and stuff like that. And I was thinking about it, and Peter Pan, I think, represented David. And I think Max, the head vampire, I think that represented Peter Pan, because he was always trying to get his the boy's mom to join his, like, you know, Lost Boys crew and all that good stuff. And that's kind of like a parallel to the Peter Pan stories, you know, how they, you know, live forever, never die, and all that good stuff. But you know, we talked about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre a few weeks ago. Brent, I know that's one of your favorite movies, and the house in this movie, the interior of it was actually based off loosely of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house, with all the taxidermy and the horns and stuff like that. But I know all of us had seen this movie before, and Brent had actually never seen the movie before, and he watched it last night. So, Brent, just give me what your take on the movie was. How'd you like it?
I thought it was a fun movie. I mean, it's really 80s heavy, so it's you can definitely tell it was made in the 80s with the big music, like preludes it would do before every big scene. But I can definitely tell how it could be a comfort movie. I mean, it's a fun movie. It makes you feel good. I did notice the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like, it's a funny movie. So when they first enter into the house, the kid says, "This looks straight out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre," and then they open up the dining room, and the grandpa has all the taxidermy stuff with the skulls, so it looks like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house. Overall, I would say it was funny, and the last of it surprised me a little bit, even though Nicole, my wife, as soon as the store owner, the head vampire, asked if he could come inside, "Oh, you're the man of the house. Can you? I need your permission." She was like, "Oh, he's the head vampire." And I was like, "Oh, you just ruined the movie. That makes so much sense now." But all that being said, I can tell why it would be one of your favorite movies. I can tell why it would be a comfort movie. Definitely, if you grew up watching it, it makes you feel good. And it's funny throughout too. So I enjoyed it. It's a fun watch.
Right. Well, I guess we'll start off with, you know, the movie starts, and it starts off with the vampire crew. They're walking on the boardwalk, and they're going on, I think, what's that thing called? A carousel. They walk on the carousel.
Yeah.
There's a couple there. They're riding it. They're having a good time. And I guess they start messing with that couple, and the security guard comes up there and he says, "I told you guys never to come on here anymore," or something like that. So he makes them leave. And another side note, how those guys walked up on that carousel on the boardwalk there, they were, I forget what order they're in, but the order they walked up on that carousel was a foreshadowing of the order that they all get killed in the movie.
Is that right? I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, they do that several times in the movie. They also do it on the bridge scene when they're all hanging there, and in the order they drop off of the bridge is the order they all die in the movie.
All right. That's
Yeah, so
pretty
that's
cool.
fun.
I didn't
Okay.
know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after that scene, it follows on later that night after everything closes and the couple's in the back of the car doing their thing, and all of a sudden the top of the car gets ripped off, and we see them get jerked out of there. You don't see much blood, you don't see much gore, but you kind of it's insinuated what happens to them.
Well, you
And that
jumped
good stuff.
ahead a little bit, just a tad.
What did I miss?
Okay, so
The security guard. My bad.
security guard kicked him off the carousel, and he says,
Yeah.
"I told you guys, stay off the boardwalk. Told you guys stay off the boardwalk." So he runs them off, and then as everything is closing down, the security guard's walking through the deserted parking lot. And there's one more thing that I thought was cool right there was there was a bunch of people that just jumped into a Jeep and was leaving, and you could see them leaving as the vampires from their view, the camera was kind of like their viewpoint. You
Yeah.
could see that Jeep leaving as they were coming in to get the security guard, which they do. Security guard sees them coming, and he takes off running and makes it to his car, but the car's locked, and before he could get the keys, he gets jerked and pulled away into the night. But I always thought as a kid, because I watched that for the first time in 1988. The movie came out in 87, and we didn't go to the theater to watch that movie. There was a lot of that kind of stuff that I missed at the theater when it first came out, and I had to wait for it to come out on VHS. So back then, it usually took almost a full year to get from the movies to being able to rent it on VHS. It was a lot slower process than what it is today. So I rented it in 1987 and watched it with my mom. And as a kid, in 88, I was, 9 years old. Shouldn't have been watching that movie, but I was, that's just how we rolled at my house. And I always thought that was cool that the vampires got the security guard right there at the first of the movie. All the people in that Jeep had to do was turn around and they would have seen it happen. And I always, think little scenes like that's cool. But Corky, you mentioned one other thing that was talking about the Peter Pan parallel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it wasn't on the documentary on the DVD, I don't think. Where I saw it was actually a panel interview. So they had everybody that was in the movie show up at like a con or something, and it was a panel interview, and they were talking about that. And the guy that played Michael, his name is Jason Patrick, and Jason Patrick had said that he wasn't going to sign on to the movie at first because the script was too goofy, pretty much. And it was too much Peter Pan heavy, and it was too much of kind of a fantasy type. So they had to do a couple of rewrites to get Jason Patrick to even sign on to do the movie. And another little tidbit about Jason Patrick is his dad is Jason Miller, and he played the young priest in The Exorcist. That was Jason Patrick's dad.
Yep, I read about that today as well.
So he had a little bit of pull, and he made them do. I think in that panel interview that I was watching, I think he said he made them do like 3 rewrites to the script before he would even sign on.
Really, that's interesting.
Yeah, I always thought that was cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. So now we've seen the security guard gets killed. Then I'm guessing after that we see the couple get killed. That's where I jumped to.
Well, so so then let's see what it's Michael and his kid brother. What was Corey Haim's character?
Sam.
Okay, so Michael and Sam, they're down there on the beach, and Michael gets fixated on Star, the good-looking girl. So he goes off chasing her, leaves Sam to his, whatever he's going to do. And so he goes walking up the boardwalk.
You're not even talking about the best scene of the movie. I mean, the
Well,
saxophone guy.
I'll get to that. I'll get to that. I'll get to that.
What was that guy's name? I forget.
I can't remember. He
Come on,
actually,
it was such bad lip. He was like,
his name was Tim Capello, and Tim Capello in real life was Tina Turner's saxophonist in Tina Turner's band. In real life, that's what he did, was play saxophone for Tina Turner.
Well, that's cool.
But anyway, what I was saying before Brent so rudely interrupted me is back then in the 80s, they just let kids just do whatever. That's very much true to life, Brent. Like, I know that Sam would have never been allowed to even go into town without the mom being right there with them, you know, if it was filmed today. Well, back in the 80s, you could just do whatever, okay? And so Michael runs off to go talk to this good-looking girl, and Sam ends up going to the boardwalk, and that's where he runs into the Frog Brothers, and that was played by
Corey Feldman.
Yeah, Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman and his buddy.
Yeah.
And they owned a comic book shop. So when he goes into the comic book shop, there's like, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them that are they pretty much run up, they steal a comic book, and they take off running. There was a couple of scenes later is whenever the vampires rip the thing off the car, and that's the 2 people that they kill.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I jumped ahead a little bit there. Since we got this was actually the first movie that the 2 Coreys had done together. And of course this spawned a whole slew of movies that they ended up doing together. But, you know, if they go and they meet Grandpa, and I guess the mom's getting divorced, and they're moving here to live with their grandpa, I guess, till she can find a job and get on her feet and all that good stuff. But they roll up and Grandpa's laying there on the porch, and they don't know if he's dead or alive and all this good stuff. And ends up he was just faking. And a tidbit I found out about Grandpa, there's a little legend and lore behind this movie. And the theory is Grandpa himself is half vampire. Now, that ties into, you know, he told him, you can never drink out of my bottles and never touch anything on the second shelf. The theory is there's blood in those bottles, and that's why he doesn't want them touching any of that. So,
well,
I thought that was pretty interesting.
Only thing that don't make sense in with that though is that there were several scenes where Grandpa is blatantly out in the sun. So if you're half vampire,
he would be half. Now, I guess Star, did she go out in the sun, or did she stay in the dark?
Star mainly stayed in the dark, but now she was only covered up with a blanket whenever they went into that cave, and they took her. They took her and Laddie. That was that kid. They took Star and Laddie out, and they only had a cover, little old blanket that's over her. So I guess her being half vampire would have been okay for her to be out in the sun. But even at that, she said that she had only been half vampire for so long, and she said that the temptation and the hunger was like getting to the point to where she couldn't fight it anymore, and she was going to have to kill somebody. So how did Grandpa, you know, overcome the hunger? I know that's the theory. The blood there, but
yeah. Well, that's the theory behind all the taxidermy stuff in there. He was killing animals and drinking their blood, and then he would just do the taxidermy stuff with them. You know, it may be far fetched, but that is kind of a fan theory that's going on there. You know, he never totally changed, because he didn't ever kill a human and feed off a human, but he would kill animals and feed off them, and that's where all the taxidermy stuff come in at the house there. So I thought that was a pretty cool tidbit. And another little thing that I discovered about this movie is if you'll go up into Sam's room, you'll see he's got posters of some girls all over the walls and stuff like that. Well, Joel Schumacher, from what I read, kind of wanted to start introducing a homosexual theme, you know, to the movie.
I was about to say that. I know where you're going with this.
Right. So he kind of, it's the theory is behind this that Sam is actual gay, and how you know this is the little Easter egg he put in there was, yeah, you look at Sam's room and there's females and pretty girl. I forget who he's got on posters on his walls, but you when you see him go up to his closet, he opens the closet door, and on the inside of the closet door is a poster of Rob Lowe without a shirt on.
That's right. That's what I was
Meaning
about
he's
to say.
inside the closet,
He's got the shirtless Rob Lowe on the closet door, and it's on the inside of it.
Right. Yeah, and you can only see that when you open the closet door, like coming out of the closet. So that was a little tidbit that was put in there.
Here's another little tidbit for you, and it's not so far off track, but the Frog Brothers, which was Corey Feldman and the other kid,
Edgar.
Yeah, so their names are Edgar and Allan.
Yeah, Edgar.
Which is a direct reference to Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, okay. I see it.
Which is a horror writer.
Yeah.
So that's another little
pretty cool.
bit. Okay, so and also, okay, I don't know if you guys are the same way, but I think way too deep into these movies, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so hear me out on this and see if you kind of think the same way. So you're watching Lost Boys, and if you're watching it, they say, okay, that's real life, right? So in real life, Rob Lowe exists as Rob Lowe in the Lost Boys. So that means that every movie that Rob Lowe was ever in was an actual movie that they could have watched in the Lost Boys universe.
Oh, yeah. That's some
You
quantum physics right there.
Yeah, you ever think about stuff like that? I think about stuff like that all the time.
Well, I'll tell you how crazy I think. I was watching this movie, and the vampires fly in this movie. They're always coming down from. So in one scene, they come down and they attack whoever it is they're doing, and then 2 seconds later they're on their motorcycles. So I'm thinking, did they fly with their motorcycles, or did they have those motorcycles stashed somewhere?
I'm gonna
that's
say
a good question too.
I'm gonna say it's a cut scene, but I know what you're saying.
One thing I wanted to say before we get too far about the grandpa, though, every time he would honk the horn of that little jalopy, it made me laugh every single time.
Yeah, grandpa was cool, man.
The grandpa made the movie.
I have walked around work going. I do that all the time, man.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
What few scenes the grandpa was in, it was what few seconds at a time that he was in, he made the movie. You take him out.
He was like the comedic relief.
Yeah. And the spikes, outside, and the spikes in the car. And
well, that just shows you he's getting ready for something that was going to happen,
Yeah. Well, I watched the movie for the first time today too, so I hadn't.
Oh, I thought you'd seen it before.
I thought you had seen it. Oh, okay.
Well, I thought I might have,
thoughts,
but as I watched it, I realized real quickly I had never seen it. So, but the opening, typical '80s movie. But when they're at the very beginning of the movie, when Max, was that his name?
Yeah.
Tells them that I told you not to come in here.
Yeah.
And they give him that look. I instantly knew they knew somebody, right? Knew each other at the very beginning.
Yeah, he gave them that look, and he was like, I told you not to come in here anymore. And then they kind of smirked, and they went on.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're watching it for the first time, and I can't tell you how I felt the very first time that I watched it because I was only 9. But, anybody who's paying attention, they're going to see that scene with Max and they're going to go, okay, he knows them or he's in with them or something. Okay. And then just like what Brent was saying, whenever Max steps up and he was like, well, you're the man of the house and I'm not going to come in unless you invite me. That's a dead giveaway right there that he is at least a vampire.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure out who the head vampire is. So, of course, he's going to be the head vampire. And I thought it was cool that when I was a kid for a long time, I was like, well, okay, even though they invited him into the house, okay, he still should have been, affected by the reflection thing, should have been affected by not necessarily garlic, but, any kind of holy water or any kind of holy object like that or whatever. And nothing happened. They put the holy water. He drank the holy water. They had the mirror. And at the end of the movie, he says, never invite a vampire into your house, you silly boy. It renders you powerless.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I have never thought about that, even because when you read most vampire things, if it's a traditional vampire, then it's kind of like, okay, the vampire can't get in your house. Well, okay, so a vampire does get in your house because you invited it or whatever. All the stuff that I've ever watched and read, the vampires have always still been subject to the reflection thing and whatnot. I'd never seen a situation where the vampire got invited into the house and really did. Now it's got control over your house because you invited it in. I had never seen it from that perspective, so I thought that was pretty cool. But Brent, you were going to say something a second ago, and I cut you off. I'm sorry, buddy.
All I was going to say was, to be fair, at the very beginning scene, the security guard says the same thing. He says, "I told you boys not to come around here again." So, but see, I'm not as deep of a thinker as Dusty is. That's the thing. I didn't pick that up. I mean, my wife did, but I wasn't able to pick it up. But Dusty, you were going on. What were your initial thoughts of this movie?
I enjoyed it. I would probably have a different perspective of the movie if I'd have watched it when I was younger. But I think that it was put together really well. And I think it was ironic, too, that the mom's name was Lucy because didn't Dracula's uncle or brother married to a Lucy?
Well, it was Lucy Westenra in the novel Dracula, and that was one of the women that was in Dracula. Yeah.
There was I thought I remembered a movie that I had watched that there was a woman named Lucy married to a vampire in an older movie or something a long time ago. But I thought it was really put together well. And then when he backs the station wagon through the house and gets speared, I mean, it was pretty comical. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, I think you always had to have a comedy element to every movie in the 80s. But
I would think the grandpa would be like the town vampire slayer.
He probably is. We never got a real backstory. I'd like to know Grandpa's backstory because he obviously knew what he was doing.
Right.
Even the two brothers, they knew something was going on too, and everybody else was kind of quiet about it.
Yeah, those two guys, I think they thought they knew what was going on. They were probably just, today's equivalent of conspiracy theory guys, because they was running around in, army camos and stuff like that.
Well, and then they still really didn't know crap about vampires because they didn't know about you being rendered powerless once you've invited the vampire into your house. They didn't know that. They didn't know about the garlic. They thought that garlic worked. Paul, which was one of the vampires, after he chased them into the bathroom after they were attacking the house, and he looked in the bathtub and they had all the garlic in there, and he was like, started laughing. He says, "Garlic don't work." And then one of them dipped their hands down in it and threw the holy water in his face and was like, "What about holy water?" And then that did work. But
yeah,
it really had the 80s Goonies feel to it. I've seen the Goonies 100 times, but where they're crawling through the little cubby hole and going through the cave, it reminded me of the Goonies in a weird way.
Yeah, going back to something Daniel said at the first when we started talking, he said they had to do several rewrites of this movie. That was one of the things that they had to rewrite because they really wanted this to be a vampire Goonie movie. Now that you brought that up,
Really?
they had to write a lot of that out as far as the movie goes, and make it a little more scary, because they originally wanted it to be like a Goonies movie that had a vampire element to it. But when I think about this movie, obviously, Michael, he him and Star fall for each other, and eventually, they go back and forth with David and all this good stuff. They race motorcycles, but the bridge scene, when they go up on the bridge and they're hanging there, and before that, he had took them to the lair, and then he had drank the blood, and they told him it was wine, but it was actually David's blood that he drank. And this movie is credited as being the first vampire movie where the vampires were, not this ugly old man type vampire. These were young kids, and they were, they weren't ugly. They were pretty, and, they were stuff like that. But so also when they go to this bridge scene, they're hanging there, and Michael has already drank that blood, and they all start dropping off. And obviously Michael, he's like, what's going on here? And this train comes. So obviously he's got to hold on, and he holds on so long that I guess he just gives out and he falls. And I think about, there's several things you have to have when it comes to a vampire movie. And every vampire movie I've seen, even if you get bit or however it happens, to become a vampire, you have to die. And I think they took him to this bridge, and they were all hanging there, and they all dropped off. And as Michael ends up dropping, he falls through the fog, and you don't see what happened to him. He just wakes up in his bed the next morning. But I believe that was his death that he had to go through. And obviously to finish the transition, you have to, feed on a human. But I think that was his death, whether it was real or not. He had to go through that to transition to a vampire. If you'll think about Interview with the Vampire, that was one of the first movies you see Brad Pitt. He's laying there, and you actually see him take his last breath. The blood on his face actually dries up and goes away as he becomes a vampire. He actually had to die to become a vampire. And that's usually a theme you see in every vampire movie, is like, to become a vampire, you have to die and be reborn as a vampire. And I think when Michael fell off that bridge, I think he actually died, and then they took him home, put him in bed, and when he woke up, he was on the vampire side of stuff. Then what do you guys think about that?
Well, the only flaw that I see is he was half vampire at the end of the movie, and then after they killed Max, then he went back to a human. So if he's already died, then he wouldn't have been able to go back to a human. That's
true.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with magic, who knows how it works?
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering what happened to him. I didn't know if this was that's as good as a theory as any, because he kind of just falls and then he wakes right up in bed. So
with his ear,
and it never happens. Oh yeah. He's not the only one that has his ear pierced. His brother, by the way, was making fun of him the whole time. He's got a little stud in his ear. Yeah. So whenever I saw that, I don't want to hear.
So talk about the bridge scene. This is my take on it. Okay. They're hanging there on the bridge, and everybody starts falling off into the fog, and Michael can't see what's going on. So Michael finally gives out, and he falls into the fog, and you hear everybody, while he's still hanging there, he can hear them laughing. That means that they were flying around in the fog, waiting for him to come down. And they knew that whenever he was going to drop off the bridge, that he wasn't going to fall to his death, because he had drank David's blood, and he had already started to take on some of the vampiric powers, which one of them was flying. Now, in like a couple of scenes later, he is at home babysitting Sam, and he almost attacks Sam while he's in the bathtub. Nanook, the dog, attacks him, pushes him down the stairs, and then Sam comes down the stairs, and then he sees him, and he was like, I don't see your reflection anymore, and he was like moving his hand up and down. You could see his hand through him. Then he got accused of being a vampire, and Sam ran back up into his room. So Michael can't get to Sam's room. So Michael goes to his own room and he lays down in bed and he's kind of laying there. And then all of a sudden he starts floating.
Yeah.
And then he floats out the window and Sam calls his mom and he starts freaking out. So to me, the scene where they're on the bridge and Michael's kind of hanging there, that is the first step to using his vampiric power. Is he falls down from the bridge and he actually is flying with them, but he doesn't know what's going on. He's freaked out, and the scene cuts to the next morning and he kind of just blocked it out. That's the way I took to it, because just a couple of scenes later is when he starts floating in the bed and he actually floats out the window. And at that point, he still don't know what's going on. He's floating like, what the crap, you know?
Well,
Yeah, he also starts having the sensitivity to sunlight and all that stuff too.
Yeah. He
about that
starts,
time.
he starts with that too, with the sunglasses and stuff.
It kind of shows him floating through the fog for a few seconds before it cuts
Yeah.
out. I mean, you
Yeah,
can
he's
see
kind of,
him
and you
floating.
can see him kind of, he's got a concerned look on his face, like, what,
Yeah.
why am I,
Yeah.
why am I just kind of suspended here? And then he kind of, freaks
Well,
out again, and then.
Maybe they caught him and flew around with him and he just, passed out or something like that. Something crazy happened at the bridge. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
on a side note though, which was kind of funny when it clicked when I started watching it, the girl that plays Star, I was like, God, I know her from somewhere. I've seen her in something.
Yeah, I was doing that the whole time.
I know
too.
exactly what movie you're about to name.
When it clicked, all I could see is that woman squealing in that red Dodge truck and Twister.
That's
Just
I knew
absolutely
you were going.
dying and going batty. But
So I'll give you another one. I'll give you another one that she was in, and it's a really good movie. But it was a movie that came out in 1986, and it had the Karate Kid in it, Ralph Macchio, and that movie was called Crossroads.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Crossroads is another really good movie that both of you guys need to watch.
I would have never
Crossroads
been
is
able
good.
to remember that she's in Twister without you saying that. But
Yeah,
now
it's
that you say
Twister.
that, now
Twister,
that you say that,
Crossroads,
She was the crazy girlfriend that fiance, and she flips
what was his
out.
name?
going
Like
nuts.
Steve?
Yeah.
No, she wasn't. She
Jill.
wasn't crazy. She was the only one out of all of them that had any
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was the one that said it was stupid to go chasing tornadoes.
Yeah, she's like,
Yeah.
you guys are what's crazy. I'm not crazy.
So, so Michael, he's doing this whole battle between, becoming a vampire and all this good stuff. Well, God, where do we go after that? So Michael,
Well, so
The first actual
Then
killing scene is next, ain't it? Where it
at that
actually
point- at
shows
that point,
blood.
he goes down to talk to Star back at the boardwalk, and that's when him and Star go back to the cave, and that Star was supposed to kill him.
yeah, but she caught feelings for him though. So by that time, and she didn't want him to kill anybody because, even before he drank the wine, she told him, she said, don't do it. It's blood,
Yeah, well, see, and that's why they were doing all them mind tricks on him.
Yeah.
So they would confuse him and he wouldn't know what's going on, because they were like, how does the maggots taste? And he was like,
Yeah.
and he goes, you're eating maggots. And he looked down and there's maggots, and he spits it out and throws it down, but then it turns back into rice. And so they were already messing with his mind there to confuse him. So there was the maggots, and then they hand him another thing with the noodles, and he says, here, have some worms. And he looks down and there's worms in there. And then David takes it back and he eats them, except they're noodles now. And now Michael's all messed up, right? So they keep playing these tricks on him to get him confused. And then they finally has Margot bring him his wine, and he says, here you go, drink some of this. And then that's when Star says, don't drink it, it's blood. Well, at that point, they've already played 2 tricks on him. So he's going, yeah, sure, it's blood, whatever. It's just another trick. So then he actually drinks it, and that's how they trick him into doing it.
Yeah, from what I read about when they were doing the whole maggot thing and the blood thing, that was kind of David flexing on him, letting him know, hey, look how powerful I am, look what I can do, and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Was David the main bully, like the main kid
Kiefer Sutherland. Yeah.
Okay, Kiefer Sutherland in this movie. One of the best things about this movie. I loved his character in this movie. I mean, it is really, really cool how he's. And I was telling Nicole while we were watching the movie, he always plays the bully in the '80s movies.
Yeah.
I mean, think of like an '80s movie. He's like 50% of the time he plays the main bully, and he does a good job with it too. He did really well in this movie.
Wasn't he in Stand By Me as well?
He was the main bully in Stand By Me.
Yeah.
He did a movie with Sean Penn and Christopher Walken called At Close Range. And At Close Range is a really good movie too. It came out in 86. And let's see, he played a thug. He wasn't like the main bad guy, but he ended up playing a thug that hung out with Sean Penn. So yeah, you're right, Brent. He was in a lot of 80s movies, big roles and small roles, but usually he was a bully of some kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay. I'll tell you something else that I think is cool. It's another little tidbit about the actors. Is Alex Winter is the guy that played Margot. Margot was the first vampire that got killed in the cave. And Margot, if you've ever seen Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, was actually Bill.
Bill, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So basically Sam goes and enlists the Frog Brothers to help them take out the vampires. So they find their little nest, their cave. It's an old hotel that had collapsed in an earthquake or something like that. So they climb down there and they find Marco, or however you say his name, and they actually stake him while they're hanging upside down, which is another crazy thing because you didn't expect to walk into vampires hanging upside down, which is another difference in this movie than past vampire movies. These guys were actually hanging there like bats, which I thought was different and very cool. But when they staked the guy, he didn't just die; he exploded on them.
Yeah.
So, and if you'll notice throughout the whole movie, when these vampires get killed, they all explode.
Yeah.
So after that, they take off running, and you see a big zoom in on Kiefer Sutherland's face, and it's just showing his face and showing his eyes because he chases them out of the cave and he hits the sun and the sun burns him, right? And it zooms in on his eyes. He's got a tear coming out of his eye, and he says tonight, he's letting tonight I'm going to kill these guys for what they just did. And a little side note to that scene right there, that tear he had coming down his eyes, down his face, was real because the contacts were irritating his eyes, and they decided to just leave it in there because they thought that made him, look like he was actually in pain and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that tear you see going down his eyes, he says tonight, that was a real tear coming out.
Yep, that was real, and it was because of the contacts.
Yep, that's pretty cool. So that night they're all hunkered down up at Sam's house, and the vampires basically they show up and they went and got holy water and all this good stuff, and they start doing battle with them, and they kill them all off one by one from various methods. One guy goes through a stereo, one guy gets thrown in a bathtub of holy water, but they all blow up when they get killed. And finally, you have the big matchup between Michael and David, and it doesn't last long. They vamp out for a minute and they fight back and forth, but Michael ends up impaling David through some antlers. And as David passes away, you actually see a transformation from him. He's always had stubble on his face through the whole movie. Well, as he dies, that stubble goes away, and he just looks like a pure 16, 17-year-old kid laying there. It's like he reverted back to what he was before he, became a vampire. And it was a fan theory for a long time, but there's a book that came out between this movie and the sequel they made, and it actually confirmed David did not die in this movie.
Really?
Everybody always thought, he died, but keep in mind, all the vampires exploded when they died. David never exploded.
He never exploded.
And David actually went on to live 20 more years, and he actually spawned whoever the bad guy is in the sequel. David turned him, and that's how we get that bad guy in the sequel is from David.
Is that right? I
That is
didn't know
true.
that.
Yep, that's true.
So-
according to
About that.
the book. Yep, according to the
So-
book.
So whenever the two brothers come out of the cave, I noticed it, and I'm gonna ask you the question because I don't know. But after they stake the first vampire, if you notice when they're running back to the car, them two boys are covered in glitter.
And
So-
glitter?
And
Yeah,
glitter.
that's,
If you paid
that's another
attention,
thing I read.
Of course,
Yeah.
I just watched it today, so it was fresh on my mind, and I was like, "Where did all the glitter come from?" So, where did the glitter come? Did it come from the vampire exploding, or
Well, here's
This
my
was the
opinion
first
on it.
vampire. This is the first vampire movie where they turn into sparkles. And Corky already said, this is the first attractive
It's like-
vampire. So this is
So
like
you
here's,
go-
Twilight.
here's my opinion on the glitter. Okay. In 1987, they don't have good CGI work. There was no CGI in this movie. Everything was live action. So if you think about it, they're out in the daylight. Now everything's well lit, and they need a way to show that a vampire blew up and covered them with a bunch of gunk. Well, that gunk was clear or kind of pinkish or whatever, and it don't show real good in sunlight. So I think they probably added the glitter to show all of the stuff that got blown up on them whenever they killed Marco.
Yeah, you're probably right, because a lot of people have asked that question: why did they put glitter in this this thing? And to my knowledge, there's no answer to it. Nobody's ever addressed it as far as the cast or the director or anything
Because
like that.
I mean, if you look at when all the vampires attacked them in the house, in Grandpa's house, there's no glitter there.
No, it was
You
just
know.
that first kill, I believe.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think that it
And it was
because,
only outside. It was only
yeah,
outside.
I think it had more to do with the lighting and the fact that they were outside than it did with anything else. They just needed something that was going to make it stand out. That's my opinion. I don't know that from any kind of documentary or anything like that. That's just my opinion.
I'd say you're right, because that's the only reason. That's the only time that we go outside in the sunlight after one of them were killed. So I'd say you're right. It's probably just to show a little texture to the blood and all that good stuff. But, after David passes away, so we think at that time, Michael, he starts realizing, hey, I still feel like I'm a vampire. Nothing's changed. And that's when we finally see Max in his vampire form. He comes in there and, tells them, I had it all set up. Everything was going to be perfect. All you had to do was join my family and all this stuff. And long story short, they go back and forth. And Grandpa backs through the side of the building, slaying some spears through some logs he had sharpened in the stakes, goes to him and kills him. And that's what ends the curse for, Michael and Star and whatever the little boy's name was.
Laddie.
Yeah, Laddie. So that's the end of the movie. We see Grandpa sit down and said, I always loved one thing about living in Santa Carla that I could never stomach was all the damn vampires. And
Yep.
that's when you realize there's more to Grandpa than meets the eye.
There's more to Grandpa than meets the eye.
Yeah.
Now here's my
I mean,
question.
that is a cool last.
I always thought it was. I agree.
Yeah.
That was a cool last
Last-
line.
And then
Yeah.
it just fades to black right off of
Mhm.
there.
But here's my question. Okay, and we don't have any comic book guys with us right now. I think if we had my younger brother Nick, he's in the comic books. He might know a little bit about it. But does anybody know anything about the Batman number 14?
No,
So-
but you know what? We should have researched that before this, because
That's right.
it's supposed to be a serious comic.
It is a very serious book, man. Is what Corey Feldman said, and I don't know crap about Batman number 14. I don't know what the significance of it is, so I don't know if it's an actual, like some kind of rare comic book, or if it was just added into the movie and it was just nonsense.
It has to have something to it, or they wouldn't mention it. I know this much: the comic that he gives Sam was called "Destroy All Vampires." Now, Santa Carla is a fictional place, but the boardwalk, wherever I think it's Santa Monica is where it's at. But that stuff's all real, and that comics book store is still there. And I do
Oh, really?
know, well, I don't know with all the LA fires that's went on. I'm hoping that it's still there. But up until, if the LA fires didn't get it, that comic book is still framed inside that comic store.
Is
today.
that right? That's
Yeah.
cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I was thinking about that comic book earlier on in the show, and I would love to have that comic book. I just think
Yeah,
it'd be cool.
Yeah, you can order copies of it all day long, but the original is still there at that comic book store.
That's awesome.
I just found a quote from Feldman addressing the glitter and the gook.
What's he say about it?
This is what he said. It said, "I personally was traumatized by the slime. People didn't realize the slime that was every time we killed a vampire. Joel had decided he didn't want to be bloody and gory. He wanted it to be able to be appealed by kids. So he knew that if it was like real blood and it looked really dark and intense, that kids would be afraid to go see it. Parents wouldn't want to show it to the kids. So instead, they created this mixture of goo with glitter in it. It was full of glitter to give it a shine or sheen or whatever. And it was real slimy and real gooey. And so once we killed the first vampire, of course, we had to match it every day. So the only reason you seen the glitter was because they walked outside, but they used the same gook with every vampire that exploded."
I didn't notice it except for the outside, but I mean that's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
pretty
got
cool.
the little quote from Corey Feldman, if you can see it.
Yeah, well, Corey Feldman.
Pretty interesting.
First off, there's one thing I want to know is why Corey Feldman is listed as the forerunner on this movie, because that dude is a Michael Jackson pretender wannabe if I've ever seen anybody in my life. And why they put him like he was some kind of star in this movie, because he wasn't.
Are you
He
saying
was an idiot.
Did he get top billing back then, or are they just saying he top
All I
billing?
know is they're giving him
what did
top
Corey
billing
Feldman
now,
do to
which that's
Corky?
stupid. Do what?
I said, what did Corey Feldman do to Corky?
Yeah.
Growing up, I was a huge fan of the Coreys, man, because they done some classic movies. But all I'm saying is Corey Feldman is off his rocker these days.
He is.
I don't know if you guys have seen any of the clips that he's done as far as that little, music show he does. Dude, it's gone. I mean, Corey Feldman could probably do, if he wanted to do music, that's great, but you ain't got to act like Michael Jackson, bro. You're not Michael Jackson. And he copies him to a point where you almost get secondhand embarrassment for the guy while he's doing it, because it's just, not only are you copying the absolute act and dancing moves of another, performer, you're not doing it well either. I mean, just be yourself if you want to do that kind of stuff.
Well, that seems like a common problem with teen or young actors. They all, when they have that much fame, it causes like a mental breakdown the older they get. Corey Feldman's not the only one that's lost their mind.
Well, what I was going to say is that dude's older than us.
I know, but
so
yeah.
Now there was a big bunch of controversy and a big bunch of stuff that come out in the 80s and the 90s about how Corey Haim and Corey Feldman were kind of introduced into a really bad life, and there was a lot of people that had taken advantage of them in a bunch of different ways. Now, I don't know the whole story to that and all that. You just have to research it on your own. But apparently, there was a lot of adults that, because they were just kids back then, there was a lot of adults that took advantage of them in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
And I think that caused a little bit of childhood trauma. You know, you take the acting and the movies out of it, you know, you've got an adult that does some things that they're not supposed to with a kid, no matter what it is, be it drugs or how you act or what you do with them or whatever, you know, that's going to have a lasting impact on anybody.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But you know, he came out and he's made a bunch of allegations about some stuff. But I do know for a fact that Corey Feldman was actually fired. He showed up to his first day, you know, to film on this movie, and I believe, as far as the story goes, he was stoned out of his mind, couldn't stay awake, couldn't remember his lines. So Joel Schumacher fired him, and he actually came back the next day and begged him and said, "Look, I'll straighten up. I'll be sober every day and all this good stuff." And I reckon he just showed some mercy on him and hired him back. But as far as his first day of filming, he was actually fired from the movie for showing up intoxicated. And only, you know, the fact the next day he begged and begged and begged, and finally he gave him another chance and brought him back.
I believe I heard that too. I believe I heard that too.
So, you know, what do you guys think? I'll start off with you, Dustin. You just watched it today, I believe, for the first time. So let's rank it 1 to 5 and give me your final thoughts on it, buddy.
Well, typical. I think the soundtrack made the movie what it is too. The soundtrack is really, really good. I'm gonna have to go with a 4, 3.5, 4. I mean, I like the movie, but it was good.
I feel you. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Maybe I would be more heart in it if I would have seen it when I was younger. And you grow up watching a movie, it touches your soul a little bit more. And then when you watch one as an adult that you had never seen, you have a totally different look and take on it. So I'd go with a 3.5. I mean, I could watch it again.
Yeah, that's a solid rating.
It is
Brent,
a solid movie.
Yeah, Brent, first time watcher of it. Go ahead and rank it 1 to 5 for us, buddy, and give us your final thoughts.
Yeah, I agree completely with Dustin. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. I think it was a really good movie. It was a kind of one of the feel-good movies. It has a little bit of comedy in it with the grandpa, has a little bit of horror in it. I could see watching this movie in October, like around Halloween time. But I love the soundtrack, like you said, and I understand where the nostalgia comes from. If you grew up with it, you could fall in love with this movie. And if you know all the actors and you grew up with the actors, I could really see how it could be one of your favorites. So I enjoyed watching it. 3 out of 5.
Awesome. Daniel, what's your take, bud?
Man, I tell you what, Dustin hit the nail on the head with the whole soundtrack.
Yeah.
The 1980s, especially for movies, was all about the music in the movies. Okay, so you had that song from Tim Capello, and it's actually a song. I still believe. I have it on my playlist. Okay.
Really?
Yeah, dude, I traded the Top Gun soundtrack cassette.
Can we just say how obvious it was that he was lip syncing? I mean, I know that it's a movie and everything, but
it don't even matter.
His mouth isn't even matching with the lyrics.
It don't even matter. It's just it's something that was in that movie that nobody needed, but it was there and it made it that much cooler.
You didn't know how much you needed it after it was done, though. You know?
I mean, I'm telling you. But
the Stranger Things song is fantastic.
Getting back to what I was saying, the 1980s for movies had some of the biggest soundtracks and some of the best music in it. Corky, I traded you another soundtrack for the Lost Boys soundtrack. It was a Top Gun soundtrack. I traded it to you when we were in high school. I had the Top Gun soundtrack cassette. I traded it to you for the Lost Boys soundtrack, and I, looking back on it, I was the one that got beat. The Top Gun soundtrack really was better than the Lost Boys soundtrack, but man, I wanted it for I Still Believe.
Yes.
Cry Little Sister.
Yeah.
You had
People Are Strange.
People Are Strange. And then the Lost Boys theme song, I can't remember what the name. It was the lead singer for Foreigner. Lou
yeah.
and Lou Graham did that song, and it was Lost in the Shadows. Lost in the Shadows, I think, is what the name of that song was. But it even had an NXS song on it.
Did it really?
Yes. You'll have to look it
Wow.
up to remember what the NXS song was, but it even had that. So you go back, you're looking at the movie. You had an 80s movie. It's a badass 80s movie. It's a wonderful 80s movie. It's got a killer soundtrack to it. It's star-studded. It's got Kiefer Sutherland in it. It's got both Coreys in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's got Jason Patrick in it. It's got there's more of them. Jamie Gertz, she was the girl that played Star, the girl that went on to do Twisters. It had a star-studded cast in it. It was a vampire movie that brought some things to the movies that people hadn't seen before. It did have some originality to it. Yes, it was 100% corny, and it was 100% silly, and it 100% had a lot of comedy in it, but all of those 80s movies were like that, man. I mean, all of them were. That's what made that movie so 80s. And I watched it a year after it come out at the theaters when I was 9 years old, and I just ate that up, man. I was all about. I am very much an 80s kid. I grew up in the 80s. All of that 80s nostalgia with the cartoons and the movies and the music and the soundtracks, all of that I got to experience firsthand. Me and Corky both did. And it was awesome. So that movie, with as silly and as corny as it is always going to be very nostalgic to me and hold a very near and dear place to my heart. Movie wise, yeah, it's a solid 4 out of 5 for me. And I can't give it a 5 out of 5 because if I'm giving The Godfather, best movie of all time, a 5 out of 5, what makes The Lost Boys on par with The Godfather? So for me, it has to be a 4 out of 5. But man, it don't get any more solid than a 4 out of 5 and an awesome 80s movie. It was just so cool, man.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the top 80s movies of all time. As far as myself goes, you know, the soundtrack was awesome. You can't really beat the soundtrack. Myself, I'm going to have to give it probably a 4.5 out of 5, just because it's got a lot of nostalgia for me. It's like I said, you know, when we began, it's a comfort movie for me. As far as I'm a vampire genre fan, you know, me and my wife both are. I don't think without this movie, I don't think you have Twilight. I don't think you have the Vampire Diaries, True Blood. I don't think you have any of that without this movie, because they kind of took vampires from like the old, you know, laying in a coffin with a cape and all this good stuff into something different. So I think it had a lot of impact as far as vampire movies that, you know, people probably don't really understand, but it did. And for that, you know, it's just a great movie. 4.5 out of 5 for me, because I love it so much.
And man, it don't get no better. If you're going to watch an 80s vampire movie, there's only two that I can think of that is a must watch. And the first one's going to be The Lost Boys, and the other one's going to be Fright Night. It's
Yes.
a very cheesy 80s vampire movie, but The Lost Boys and Fright Night. If you're wanting vampire movies, you got to watch both of them.
It
Yeah,
could have just
most
been the
definitely.
setting. It could have just been the setting that I watched it, but I think I would have to put Fright Night over The Lost Boys. But we can talk about that on a different episode.
Hey, Fright Night's good.
That's-
can't take anything away from Fright Night. It's an awesome movie too.
Dust Till Dawn.
You know,
That's
I've never
90s.
seen Dust Till Dawn, but yeah, it's early 90s.
Yeah.
I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I've never watched it front
Hey
to
man,
back.
I'll
I
tell
need
you
to watch
what,
that.
I would watch From Dusk Till Dawn with as silly as what it is. I'd watch that today just for Selma Hayek.
Dude,
Selma
everybody
Hayek.
loves that movie. Everybody
Selma
loves it.
Hayek in that movie was
Well-
really cool.
It is wide open. That movie is blood and gore all the way through the movie.
Yeah, that's great. Well, guys, I think that pretty much wrapped this one up. Anybody else got anything they want to add before we cut on out of here this week?
Not that I can think of. It's just a cool movie, man. For everybody who's listening, if you have not seen Lost Boys, you need to definitely see it. And if you have seen Lost Boys, you need to see it again.
Go watch it again because it ain't gonna hurt nothing but make you a better person.
Not
But
the sequels.
well, hey, maybe we'll cross that path in another
Yeah, when we
podcast.
do awesomely bad movies, we'll talk about them.
We'll probably do the tribe then. But hey,
Yeah.
we appreciate everybody listening to us, man. Give us a like and a comment and a subscribe if you come across this and you like it. We appreciate everybody listening to us. And until next week, we'll see you. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Remember, we keep it tight, and it's a podcast world. We're ready to ignite. That's the lesson. You got it all. Tune in, turn up, come by with us, y'all. So remember.